Tonight on Nation and Nation, Cindy Woodhouse is the new National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Her goal at the AFN is unity.
It's so important that we unite more than ever. We're facing many crises in this country, and our people are facing the highest poverty levels in this country.
Many chiefs think the Assembly of First Nations is no longer relevant, but someone who worked on Sheila North's campaign wants them to come back to the table.
This is your organization, you have a voice. And that when we're united as people, as First Nations people and Indigenous people, we are very powerful.
It's been over a year since tragedy struck the James Smith Cree Nation with a mass stabbing. The chief of this First Nation gives an update.
Today we're still grieving for our loss, and it's just still, we still feel the effects of September 4th.
Welcome to Nation Nation. I'm Fraser Needham. We're here at the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly in Ottawa, where on Wednesday it was a little marathon of voting, 6 ballots in all, before Cindy Woodhouse was elected as the new National Chief of the AFN. This after David Pratt conceded. We'll take you now to the new National Chief's first press conference.
And I want to thank the press as well for always being balanced and always trying to do their job in a good way. So thank you. Miigwech. I'll take your questions now. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's Christy Kirkup from the Globe and Mail over here.
Hi.
Thanks for doing this, National Chief. You mentioned that you were on the phone with the Prime Minister. Can you tell us what are some of the things that you talked about in your first exchange as National Chief with the Prime Minister, and what are the top issues that you will be pushing the federal government on in your capacity?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we need housing, like I said, and more importantly, we have to make sure that roads are built underneath and that we have infrastructure and water and all those things that maybe Canadians take for granted. First Nations need those proper investments, and we've had a commitment to close the gap to 2030. So I'd like to hold their feet to the fire to get those gaps closed in a good way, though, in a respectful way. We had a very good conversation, and we also talked about policing as an essential service, that we have to get that moving. We talked about economic development and making sure that First Nations people are no longer left out of the economy of this country. We need to be working more closely together. That's what partners and allies are supposed to do. So thank you.
And just as a follow-up, I know you mentioned the negotiations on child welfare, and of course you played the lead negotiating role for the AFN. What are some of the lessons that you take away from that process that you will perhaps be drawing on in your capacity as National Chief?
Well, if people don't listen, I'm going to go higher, right? I'm going to move up I'm going to go to the highest levels if I have to make sure that our people are heard, to make sure that we get results for First Nations people.
Hello, National Chief. It's Brett Forrester here with CBC Indigenous. Some of the delegates I spoke to in the room, particularly those who were supporting Dean Sayers, Sheila North, and Vice Chief Pratt, were concerned that the AFN is sometimes seen as being a little bit too close to the federal government, and wanted to see the AFN take a stronger stance in defense of First Nations rights. What do you say to those chiefs in those communities who want to see the AFN take a more adversarial approach with the federal government?
Hey, look, in the past, I've worked for chiefs, and like I said in I don't know if you were here yesterday, but I spoke about Chief Francis Flett, where we had to stick up for fishermen, and we had to lock the doors on Indian Affairs in order to give us, on the federal government, and lock some of the, because we needed to get action on that. And I remember back then watching him, and we walked out of there with a commitment to work on fishing for our fishermen. So I get that sometimes that's needed, but at the same time, there's also a time to try and work through these things. I think we are at a time right now where we're trying to work through some of these hard issues, and our people expect that of us. And yes, we have to sometimes kick down doors, or sometimes we have to do what we have to do to get our people recognized. But at the same time, I think that in this moment, I'm coming in here as a fresh start to try and say, let's work through some of these issues together. And I hope that the governments are there, the federal governments, and I hope that Canadians are there to help us as well, to be supportive and to be allies to our people, because we're on a long road of a relationship building, and we're just starting to talk about reconciliation. We haven't talked about it before. This is a new word from a few years ago. So if we're really going to work on reconciliation, let's start, and let's work through these things together.
And as a follow-up, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was that you had secured roughly 50% support by the end of the 6th ballot, so still shy of the 60% needed to win under the charter. How satisfied are you with the strength of the mandate you've been given from the chiefs, and how satisfied are you with the turnout from the chiefs?
Well, I certainly think no election, I think that for the Assembly of First Nations does a lot better, even the national elections. We have a lot, we have more of our people. I know some people federally, I think 40 or 50% of Canadians vote. In this election, we had, 70% of our people vote. We had a high number of our leadership vote from across the country. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. Do we have to make changes? Absolutely, we have to do a review of that. And this has happened time and time again from different elections. We see some of the shortfalls in all of that, and we have to look at that and review that and take options back to our chiefs, because I think that we could do better. Yeah.
I'm going to sneak a third one in on behalf of my parliamentary colleagues in Ottawa. They'd like to know if you will support Ontario chiefs who are in court challenging the carbon tax.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's going to hurt our people. I've got to, of course, go to our specialists. I've got to go to the Assembly of First Nations staff and ask them to do a thorough analysis on that. But from what I'm hearing, it's going to hurt our people, and we should have a proper legal strategy on that, as well as a political lens on it. How does that affect First Nations people? So I think we could talk about that down the road, and I ask for a little bit of time for me to look through that and get a thorough briefing on that issue. Thank you.
Next up, we'll talk to Jeffrey Copenance and Kara Curry-Hall about the future direction of the AFN. You're watching Nation to Nation. I'm Fraser Needham. Joining me now are Jeffrey Copenance, and he's the chief of the Nimigaming First Nation in Ontario, and Kara Curry-Hall, who was working on Sheila North's campaign for national chief. Both are veterans of First Nations politics, and will share their ideas on what the future direction of the AFN should be. Thank you both for joining us today. Right, and so I guess I'll start with you, Kara. What we heard yesterday, throughout the week at the AFN here, was unity, collaboration, stability, and it was a theme that ran through. Is that what the AFN needs right now?
Well, the AFN absolutely needs unity, without question, because we watched maybe the last decade of leadership, and there's just been an exodus of people leaving the organization, refusing to participate, believing that the Assembly of First Nations is no longer a relevant organization to them, that it works against them instead of with them, and they've in fact passed resolutions to exit. And so our effort is really in this campaign and has been trying to encourage to come back to the table. This is your organization. You have a voice. And that when we're united as people, as First Nations people and Indigenous people, we are very powerful. And if you look at Sheila North has been lifting up the feather of Elijah Harper. And remember, when the nation rallied, Elijah Harper was that sole voice, and that unity together stopped the assimilation of all of us and killed Meech Lake Accord. So we're very, very powerful when we're united, and we must come back together. Because of the bigger issues that are impacting us as Indigenous people that continue to threaten our rights, continue to threaten our existence through memorandums of understanding and legislative pieces. So it's really imperative we unite.
Thanks. And with that, I wanted to ask you, Jeff, I know you've been critical sometimes of First Nations organization of not having proper respect for women, or that has been an issue, of course, and we've seen some of the things that have happened over the last 6 months or so with Arlen Dumas and others. What do you think about having the code of conduct policy here, having people sign in? There's a little more security. Is that something that's a good thing that the AFN is doing?
Well, first I want to say miigwech. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I want to give a shout out to the Ojibways of Onigaming. I know there's people watching back home and they're streaming. And we've brought a number of high school students and elders from Onigaming to be here as well. And the most important thing for me, especially for the young women and the young men from the Mikinak Onigaming High School that are here, is to show them how to do business with dignity, to show them how to speak as a leader of Anishinaabe people in a good, positive way. You know, that's why I made those comments that I made last year. But it's not just incumbent upon me, it's incumbent particularly on all men, on all First Nation men, Anishinaabe men across this country, to speak up and protect our women and girls at all costs. You know, we're still discussing this terrible tragedy in Winnipeg and how many bodies of our women and girls are in that landfill. You know, there's still not a resolution to it. We're still facing, you know, if you were to talk to chiefs across the country, you know, we're still facing death after death, week after week in communities. And, you know, you get the feeling that it feels worse at times. But then you come to an event like this. Our youth were really excited. They attended the All Candidates debate last night. They attended the Q&A. It's their first trip. They're seeing all the chiefs here. It's very exciting. So I see this as a real opportunity.
Right, so maybe I'll just follow up with you, Kara, on that sort of this youth thing. It's a problem across all politics, but of course you need young people involved at the political level, young First Nations people to drive organizations like this to make change. You've been at this a long time. What are the challenges of, how do we get young people involved, in young First Nations people involved in organizations like this and running for office and making a difference?
Well, that's a really, really important factor, and it's been an issue that's been raised in the campaign. And the young people are at the assemblies. They're asking, how can we be involved? How are you candidates going to involve us? So they're raising their voices and taking a space. They want a space. They want to partner. So the Treaty 1 to 11 gathering that happened in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, at the end of July, I think it was. They stood up and they actually said, because they had different tents for different groups, and they actually separated the youth. They had their own tent. And they said, we want you to fight with us, don't fight against us. And so there was a commitment made at the Treaty 1 to 11 that there was going to be a national youth run leading up to 2024. And in addition to that, there's going to be a youth conference. But the youth here in the Assembly of First Nations, in the assembly that's going on now, after everything went offline last night, I was online live. The youth representatives asked if they could talk to the candidates on the floor. So they asked these same questions, and it was really important. And they're critical for us because they're watching us. They're watching how we behave. They have more access to media than any of us. They're all experts. This is how they're all being raised on social media. And they said, we want a voice. We want to be here. If we're not transmitting our values and leadership and values into them and our vision, then what are we doing here? You know, we need everybody at the table. We need the chiefs at the table. We need the elders at the table. We need the youth at the table.
Okay, and that sort of leads into my next question for Jeff, which is, there's been a lot of talk about, it's always the talk is how to make the AFN relevant, how to make it effective, lots of different views. Nigan Sinclair, I believe, was on media this week saying, you know, maybe that it's time that it became a regionalized organization, sort of what you're talking about splitting into, you weren't talking about that necessarily, but, you know, having different voices. And so obviously the issues are so different from coast to coast. Is that's something, Jeff, you think that maybe the AFN needs to look at, is regionalizing?
You know, I think truly what the Assembly First Nation needs to do in its efforts at renewal is to look at considering allowing our young people to vote for the national chief, to consider allowing our citizens to vote for the national chief. You know, we sat here and we've got a delegation of high school students as well as elders, and for some of the speeches, they were jumping up and down in their seats, and they were really cheering. They were very into it. This is really the only time that I've seen my community really engage, and I try to bring youth to every event. I really try to bring them to try to inform my decisions, inform my voice, and perhaps it's time to really, really open up the organization. That's the disconnect I see. You know, there was a time when the Assembly of First Nations, again, in the earliest days in its inception, didn't have the resources, didn't have the multi-million-dollar budget that it did. But because of the needs and because of the demands and because we were losing lives, particularly in the cities in the 50s and 60s of this country in the last century, we'd be banded together. People would just jump in cars. People would jump on rail cars. They would do whatever they can to get here, to fight for our people. They would borrow money to go to London to lobby the Queen. And so, you know, I think there just comes a time when we really, really need to show people, including our people struggling in the streets, that you matter, that your vote matters, that your life matters, and if you've got a chance to vote for the National Chief, perhaps then there'll be more accountability as well. And maybe some of these issues that we deal with in terms of protecting our women and their girls, again, will be held more accountable for ourselves as well, including our men. So again, I'm looking forward to the day when we see true you know, engagement, participation, and I'm not sure we see that right now, but I think the opportunity is right now. I'm looking forward to the next National Chief being able to try to look forward to that.
Unfortunately, we could probably talk all day, and it's a real pleasure to have both of you, such big players in First Nations politics, and the knowledge to have you here today. And I can't thank you enough for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the Assembly. Thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up next, we'll have Chief Wally Burns of the James Smith Cree Nation in Saskatchewan to talk to us about First Nations policing. I'm Fraser Needham, and you're watching Nation to Nation. We're at the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly, and one of the issues that has come up a lot is First Nations policing. A number of candidates have mentioned it, and it's sort of a coast-to-coast issue that a lot of First Nations would like to see more resources put into. Joining me today is Chief Wally Burns from James Smith Cree Nation, who has a lot of things that his community would like to see, and especially in the wake of a tragedy that occurred there a little over a year ago. So thanks very much for joining us here today, Chief Burns. And I guess I thought I would just say this opportunity. Of course, everybody in Canada remembers what happened there, and our hearts go out to you as a crowd coming from Ottawa, and I know it was a difficult situation. Now, since the tragedies there and the 11 people that were killed as part of that, how is the community doing, and what has happened sort of in that little over a year space?
Well, today we're still grieving for our loss, and you know, it's just still we still feel the effects of September 4th, and to me, I think we're working on initiatives to try heal our community in our own perspective, cultural, traditional ways. So a lot of our people are finally coming out of their homes, and you know, I think a long time coming, and making sure that, you know, our community is safe again. And I'm very fortunate that we have 28 staff that patrol the community, and but the resources are going to be running out. But I think we really have to look at the focus point on funding our 28 staff and security, and that's one of the things that, you know, we're pushing is self-administered policing. After September 4th, 2022, James Smith took to the initiative on moving forward on self-administered policing. We went to numerous First Nations across Canada and took the concepts, some of their concepts, in how to develop our own structure and our own policing and our own justice system, making sure that, you know, we follow the whole process that needs to be done for our First Nations on self-administered policing.
And I'll move to the talk about, because of course the tragedy, why it is a tragedy is because it's preventable, and it's caused by poverty, you know, things like opioid crisis really bad in Saskatchewan, and things like that. So how has that been assistance for your community and other around?
Well, I think after COVID, I think a lot of communities are overwhelmed with you know, the staying home, and after COVID, a lot of addictions came out, and you know, I think looking at it in perspective, where, you know, we gotta all work together and making sure that, you know, all communities are having a discussion on their own communities and safety, and that's one of the things that, you know, I emphasize is that we look for a principle on how we can have better communication with, you know, the justice system, with the community members, and, you know, making sure that all efforts are looked about, and making sure that, you know, we gain momentum in regards to the whole process itself. So yeah, it's working efficient in how we conduct our business back home. So, you know, it's after September 4th, we had a lot of things happen in our community. Not only September 4th, we had domestic disputes, all of the things along the line, but every community in Canada has same situations as First Nations communities. So, yeah.
Just sticking on that point about the drugs, and of course they have to come from drug dealers, and I have heard the complaint that it wasn't or the assertion that it wasn't a problem until quite recently that drug dealers started coming into First Nations. They didn't have a problem. So some have passed resolutions, I'm not sure if your community has, that wanting more power to get rid of these people and to be able to take matters into their own hands. Is that something that you've pursued? Or
well, yeah, we're under ban custom, and we can develop our own bylaws, our own policies and procedures. That's one of the things that our elders are having a discussion on how the leadership can, maintain their governance in regards to, taking the drug dealer out of our community, or let our kids live a little longer without drugs. I think we really have to emphasize in regards to being a role model. I take great strides in trying to, have a discussion with our youth in our education system, making sure that, all aspects and voices are heard from them. I walked into their assembly, and I'm very fortunate I walked out with 260 letters on how or what they wanted to see in the community of James Smith.
So I'm just going to move to now the tragic deaths last year, and also I understand an inquest is coming up. But you'd like to see something more, maybe along the lines of an inquiry?
Yeah. Yes. I think majority of our people and our families that that we lost loved ones, and they're asking us leaders to making sure that the inquest or inquiry is looked upon in the right way. And I know January is going to be coming up here pretty quick, and that's, we're trying to maintain a goal where our people can go to and talk to the mental area, health area, and our elders are waiting patiently for this time to come. But we got to give them time, and we can't force them to come into the inquiry or the inquest. But I'm very fortunate that they will. But I'm asking our community, just take your time and believe in yourself that you can come and listen, But we're here to support one another, and that's one of the things that we always did since September 4th. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sure it's important this information come out, but it has to be done in a way that fosters healing as well as what you're saying, right? So unfortunately I'm going to have to leave it there for time, but always a pleasure to talk to you, Chief Burns, and until next time, and thanks for joining us on Nation to Nation today.
Yes, thank you
so much. That concludes this week's episode of Nation to Nation. If you missed any part of tonight's show, you can check out our podcast at aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Fraser Needham. Good night.